Alright, in this video I'm going to show you real quick how the clone stamp works in Adobe Photoshop. It seems kind of complicated, but it's actually really easy. The biggest thing you need to understand is that when we're clone stamping, we're not removing things from a photo, we're actually covering things up. And that'll make a little bit more sense once I show you how it actually works. So let's grab the clone stamp. It's right here on the toolbar. It's keyboard shortcut S. And you'll notice the clone stamp is a circle, just like any brush tool. So that means we can make it bigger or smaller by using the bracket keys. Right bracket key makes it bigger, left bracket makes it smaller. And we can also change the hardness or softness by right-clicking and moving this slider back and forth. What you'll set the hardness to will depend on what you're clone stamping. For these first few, I'm going to set the hardness to a little bit higher number, and it's going to make life a little bit easier. So here we go. Let's remove this big spot here by covering it up with the bluish greenish color that is surrounding it. To do that, we need to create what's called a sample point. And you create a sample point by pressing and holding the Alt key. And see how my cursor changes from a circle to a little bullseye / target? This is Photoshop asking me, what do you want to cover this spot up with? What do you want to use to cover that up? So I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to click with my mouse, and then I let go of Alt and I let go of the mouse. A big mistake that people make is they keep Alt held down or they keep the mouse button held down, but you don't need to do that. Hold down Alt, click, and then let go of the button on your mouse and let go of Alt, and we've just created a sample point. It's a little confusing because you don't really see anything happen, but you're just going to have to trust that it did. Notice too where the location that I created my sample point. It's not too close. If I create a sample point here, that's going to be bad. And it's not too far away. If I create it way out here, that also is bad. So the location is also very important. You want to be not too close and not too far away. So that takes some practice, but for me, I know that right about here is probably going to be a good spot. So I'll create my sample point. And then all I got to do is move my cursor over the spot. And you can see Photoshop's already giving me a little sneak preview of what's going to happen when I click. That's why it's blue inside of my cursor there. So if I start clicking and dragging, you can see it's now covering up. It's cloning the area that I sampled and putting it over the top of that spot. Okay. Ooh, one important thing I forgot, we should always duplicate the background layer before we start. So let's try that again. Hold down Alt, create my sample point, come in here, and then just click and drag. And you see that little plus sign there on the right, to the right of the cursor? That is the area that is currently being cloned. So if you're ever wondering where your cloning is coming from, that plus sign is what is being cloned. You can see as I move my clone stamp, that plus sign also moves. It's a good idea to create a new sample point every time you go to a new spot. So for this spot right here, I'm going to come create a sample point, probably about right here. I'll move my cursor over, and you can see I can get rid of that one in just one click because it was a smaller spot. Now be careful when you're cloning. You don't want to go crazy. You don't want to be like a 4-year-old with some crayons. So I haven't cloned this one out yet. You want to clone as little as possible. Sometimes I see you guys go like this. You're like, "Argh!" You're scribbling your mouse all over the place. And bad things happen when you do that. So let me Control-Alt-Z that. Sample point, click, come down here, sample point right about here, click, sample point here, click, and it's gone. And then one more, and it's gone. And let's look at my before and after here. And that looks pretty good. Let's take a look at another. So this one's basically the same thing, only we have to be a lot more careful about the background and where we choose our sample point. So before, on the last file we did, as long as we were close to the spot, it didn't really matter where our sample point was. But this time it really matters. So let's duplicate the background layer. And I want to show you what happens if I'm going to get rid of this spot right here. I got to really be careful where I choose my sample point. If I sample down here, come in and try to get rid of it, well, that's obviously wrong. Or if I sample up here, that's obviously wrong. In fact, there's only one spot that's the perfect sample point, and it's my job to find it. So I'm going to look at the background. I see that it's kind of at an angle here, so I'm going to try to match that angle when I choose my sample point. I'm going to try right there. Let's see how that looks. And I'm going to come in here, and ooh, that looks really good. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit off. So I'm going to Control-Alt-Z that. I'm going to try it one more time. I bet I can get it this time. This is a little tricky, so don't feel bad if it takes you 2 or 3 tries to get it. So I got it that time. So now I'm going to come over to this spot right here, new sample point. And I'm actually using that little sneak preview that Photoshop's giving me. Like I can tell that if I click right now, it's going to be too dark. If I click right now, it's going to be too bright. So what I'm doing is I'm moving my cursor until that preview that Photoshop is giving me kind of blends in. And you can see, oh, just a tiny bit off. So whenever you Control-Alt-Z, you always want to do a new sample point. So a new sample point, and oh, I'm still a little bit off. And let's see if I can get it this time. There we go. That's pretty dang good right there. So I would just keep going here. Just keep working your way through this until you get the all of the spots removed. Remember, if your sample point doesn't work out, just Control-Alt-Z and choose another one. But remember to always choose a new sample point before you get to each spot, and it should be pretty easy for you.